What's up, Meta Nerds? This video will be a complete breakdown of one of the most iconic ships in all of Star Wars. Definitely a CIS beauty, the Munificent-class star frigate, and we'll be pulling from every resource available. First, the context of its creation. What the fall of the Republic era is so great at showing is a political science truth that laws are enforced by weapons. Everyone from my dad to Enlightenment philosophers, the founding fathers of America, to the famous Mao quote that goes, "Political power grows out of the barrel of a gun." The Republic forgot this, since as long as the Old Republic era with the Recusant reformations that demilitarized the galaxy because they felt that they had finally defeated evil by defeating the Sith. Well, of course, they didn't even defeat all the Sith, nor were the Sith only ones capable of committing violence. And this combination of silliness allowed the secret Sith in hiding to slowly guide the corruption of the galaxy. But as much as the Jedi would love to blame the yellow-eyed boogeymen and women of the dark side, simple sins like greed and anger naturally gave rise to all the sorts of crime that existed long before the Sith. Ironically, Coruscant itself had some of the most entrenched criminal areas, but as a general rule, the further from the core, the less fear you had of law enforcement, and the succession of planets that we see in the CIS had been building up for a millennia. As the core relied more and more on trade from the Mid and Outer Rim worlds, you see the Republic having to allow the megacorp conglomerates like the Trade Federation to defend themselves. Because the Republic decided that a military was evil, but they lived in a universe that required physical violence to stop even greater evils, they end up ever increasing the amount of weaponry that these companies could manufacture and deploy. So with every century, the Republic became weaker, and the criminals and corporations got stronger. Because of course, the crime lords would be able to take over some facilities, hijack some ships, and now the corporations needed more weapons to fight off the thugs using their old blasters and gunships. While Republic politicians sat back and allowed this power creep to take place in the criminals and corporations. Horus Kessel Drive was one of the oldest ship manufacturers in the galaxy, existing at least since 4000 BBY, and owned by Neimoidian investors. It would legally produce all the weapons we see on the Lucrehulk, since it was intended to just be an enormous cargo ship. The droid starfighters were accepted too, and it was actually the ground force that was more problematic, seen correctly as more in line with an invasion force, which of course is what we saw during the Boo, but even that was in a gray area because it could be used to defend planetary facilities. Pirate empires across the galaxy were known for massacres, so even the Republic did allow corporations to have ground forces, and even applaud the moral choice of going with droid forces, since this way the Republic citizens, those employees working at the countless Trade Federation facilities at every step from mining to manufacturing, these people would not be killed in defense. It was droid ships and vehicles. No Republic citizen killed in a tank or starfighter even on defense, while you are taking out the evil criminals. So it was a great deal for the Republic in a way. But of course the core was starting to get nervous, as much as people like to play pretend, they all did understand that political power did extend from the barrel of a blaster. And now all those blasters were in private hands, manufactured in areas of the galaxy far from Coruscant, with their own self-sufficient economic ecosystem. It's not an exaggeration to say that this is one of the worst approaches to violence I've ever heard of. Normal citizens, even wealthy individuals, if you weren't in that sector, were not allowed to have access to the terrible implements of war. There was no proper military, just the judicial authority, and of course the Jedi Order had weapons and vehicles, but even they had to rely on the Trade Federation to save them during the Stark Hyperspace War just 12 years before Naboo. The only people with access to what we would think of as military-grade ships and vehicles were the crime lords and ultra-wealthy entities in the military-industrial complex, which often overlooked does include the banks. The Munificent and Recusant were manufactured by Horus Kessel Drive for the banking clan. They safeguarded the clan's private communications network, enforced control over indebted worlds, transported crucial financial assets, and protected vast treasure vaults. Equipped with hyperwave transceivers and advanced communication arrays, the Munificents were essential to the clan's operations, enabling secure galactic financial transactions. And we can see these transceivers here on the wings, with the energy cells that store power for them over here, and the cells being fed by these lines that run along here, pulling from the main reactor located up here, which is said to annihilate up to 2,300 tons of fuel per second. That might sound impossible, but it has to do with the super dense state of that fuel which is being used. Of course, there's a little hand waviness going on here, but in general, think of the idea of how a cubic foot of osmium weighs about 1,402 pounds, while a cubic foot of water would only be 62 pounds. In the galaxy far, far away, there is a fuel source with an even more dramatically heavy density, and that's what's being used to power most of the capital ships. And thanks to this video's sponsor, Warhammer 40,000 Tacticus. This game has been impressing longtime Warhammer fans with its 70+ champions and 17 playable factions. With an average rating of 4.5 in the app sites, Tacticus is recognized as the go-to game for top-quality tactical gaming. This is an officially licensed game with a passionate community, as Warhammer fans really are some of the most invested fans out there. Work with and against other real players all over the world in this turn-based tactical strategy game, creating exciting moments as you build your faction and sweep through the galaxy. Even the most veteran Warhammer players are impressed with this game, and there is so much to do with PvE campaigns, PvP, live events, guild raids, and more. This game came out back in August of 2022, but there's been a constant supply of fresh content, features, modes, and events, and this December, the famous Red Gobo appears in time for Grotmas. So use the link down in the description and pinned comment, or this QR code, and start playing today. Use gift code HAPPYDEC to get 2,000 gold and 50 Blackstone, and that offer will be good up to January 1st. Be sure to check it out. Thanks again to Warhammer 40,000 Tacticus. After the banking clan aligned with the Confederacy, Chairman Sandhill dedicated a fleet of these frigates to the Separatist cause, and during the Clone Wars, the Munificent-class became a cornerstone of the Confederate Navy, with tens of thousands entering service. These ships were marked with the blue and white Confederate emblem and paint scheme, though many also retain the banking clan's signature green stripes alongside Confederate colors. It shows their dual allegiance. At a length of 825 meters, or 2,706 feet, it was nearly 70% the length of the Venator, while at a width of 426 meters, or 1,397 feet, made it more than twice the Providence, and its height of 243 meters, or 797 feet, made it stand taller than 10 AT-ATs. Its max acceleration of 2300 G makes it significantly slower than the Providence and the Venator, though its hyperdrive is relatively impressive, being a Class 1, which is the fastest that these mass-produced ships usually get. And the 150,000 light-year effective range means it could cross the galaxy and come back again halfway before needing fuel. The hyperdrive unit is located at the top of this tower, which is rather exposed. Its crew is usually only 200 organics, which for comparison, the Imperial Star Destroyers were always around 40,000. That's 200 times the crew, and it's said they achieved this by having a lot of automation, having droid brains operating the ship, while itself was also packed with 150,000 deactivated battle droids, which is probably higher than the original amount that was packed in here to fight off pirate attacks. And it really points to the scale of warfare. It's something we sadly don't see too often, but taking command of one of these ships would be like a mini campaign in of itself. With an invasion force that could take and secure certain parts of the ship, fighting over days or weeks, with these capital ships being city-sized craft with dozens to hundreds of levels or decks. And the closest thing we see to this is how Ringo Vinda operated like a planetary invasion, just due to how vast it was. So 150,000 battle droids spread all over the ship, while most of the crew were in these habitable areas toward the bow. Frighteningly placed right over the main gun, but maybe like I mentioned in the Praetor Mark II vid, the crew should not be in these crew areas during combat, so they'd be off at their stations, allowing the crew area to act like a crumple zone, something that could be hit and not damage anything important in the heat of combat, because the main areas to hit are the bridge, power core, and the main guns. In total, there are 2 heavy turbolaser cannons that really are being too modest. Their critique is that they are slow to maneuver, but these are like massive artillery pieces compared to a tank. And they're just called heavy because that's a catch-all term for stronger than normal turbolasers. The twin turbolaser cannon was powerful enough to melt an ice moon measuring 1,000 kilometers in diameter, or pierce the shields of a 10-kilometer wide Grade 3 battle station. We don't have a lot of other stats to compare that to, but that's given to us to show that these are exceptionally strong weapons, qualitatively different from something else that might also be called heavy. Think about like video game logic, it would be like a sniper compared to a rifle or even DMR. And that applies for my favorite weapons on any ship. This thing has 2 long-range ion cannons. The ion weaponry is the most overlooked, but if you can turn a ship off, you win. And you have the option to take prisoners and ships intact. It gives you far more options, and funny enough, you can see the Mune's philosophy going into the design concept of this ship, wanting to stay far away from actual combat and manipulate the battlefield from a distance. But knowing that during the war, these would be in the thick of it, there are also 26 twin turbolaser cannons, 20 light turbolaser turrets, and 38 point defense cannons, some of which we can see along this ridge, tucked right underneath this sloping, thick armor plating, and the light ones are up top here, with some point defense focused in on the towers to protect these crucial systems. Though some iterations would up it to 40 point defense, 8 medium flak guns and a hyperwave jammer. The long-range heavy cannons and ion cannons, combined with the hyperwave jammer, makes this frigate a surprisingly specialized sort of capital ship assassin. And the increase in point defense and flak means that the Republic was doing a great job with their starfighters and bomber runs, anchored by the powerful ARC-170s, because we normally think of the overwhelming droid fighter swarms of the CIS. On here, the official complement is very low, reporting 12 to 36 starfighters and 12 landing craft. but it could be hundreds if not thousands of vultures because, as this snippet explains, because the automated droid brain tech allowed it to be so relatively spacious and hollowed out, giving it a skeletal appearance, especially in the Recusant, so they could host numerous starfighters in these spacious hull cavities. Covering all of its surface, at least when you're in space, if you're worried about that weight and movement would be bad in atmosphere. And we get a glimpse of this during the Battle of Coruscant, though it does mention that if the shields go down, none of these sections are covered by hull armor, and so they're extremely vulnerable. And just a small detail, I love that the Munificent's ray shield generator is located at the rear. It just works perfectly with the long-range capabilities of this ship, that it can be facing the target, projecting that shield to the front, and either stunning or destroying an enemy from far away. Some other details to point out before its history is that it can also accommodate 850 troops and support staff. And there were occasions where these troops and the 150,000 droids on board were used as boarding parties to take over Venators, and of course deploy planetside. Its cargo capacity was 40,000, which is about 50,000 dewbacks, while the docking rings line this area and could take vessels, but also just leave the craft attached to work as an external storage when it was in peacetime, and when it was moving around the actual rare materials that back the credits issued by the banking clan. The command tower of Munificent-class starship was situated at the bow, slanting diagonally upward toward the main structure. Within the tower, a turbolift shaft linked the various operational stations, while each level featured wide, panoramic windows, offering a clear view of the surrounding space. While the bridge, designed with minimal equipment, featured a series of terminals arranged across multiple ascending tiers, forming a pyramid-like structure. At the apex, the ship's commander took position, flanked by an operator on either side. In this entire command tower structure was where most of the 200 crew would be, calling on the original function as being essentially a secure internet router dedicated to online banking that could fire on anyone at a long distance, eliminating all threats to the flow of galactic trade. During the Clone Wars, the Munificent-class played a critical role in guiding and coordinating Confederate ships operating deep within enemy territory. They provided escort and support to key Separatist operations, including assaults on interstellar holonet relays, designed to undermine the morale and communications of Galactic Republic forces. Leveraging their advanced antenna, the frigates broadcast anti-Republic propaganda, while their jamming devices disrupted enemy sensors, targeting systems, and distress signals. And it's one of the most interesting aspects of this ship, that it went from playing such a crucial role in galactic trade to having a serious propaganda effect in the Clone Wars. It's not as flashy as explosions, but many Republic officials knew that the #1 threat to the war was the public's opinion of it. And the Munificent played a key role in making sure that the Republic sensors did not have complete control of the holonet. And following Admiral Trench's defeat by the prototype cloak vessel, most of these ships underwent refits during the war, enhancing their sensors to even detect cloaked or massive objects, relying on the actual warping of spacetime. As the war drew to a close, thousands of these frigates participated in the climactic Battle of Coruscant, showing how integral they were to the Confederacy's fleet. After the Clone Wars, many Munificent-class frigates and their crew fled beyond the reach of the Galactic Empire, ironically turning to piracy or mercenary work, offending their munificent ancestors. Some eventually found their way into the Rebel Alliance, where they were heavily modified, often to the extent that their original designs became almost unrecognizable. So that's it for the breakdown, and as for behind the scenes facts, Munificent means a gift or sum of money, which is larger or more generous than normal. It's going above and beyond, much like the lore of this ship. The concept art for the ship wanted it to be organic and rounded, making a stark contrast to the sleek, triangular aesthetics of the Galactic Republic and Imperial ships. And some people think that there's a strong resemblance to Mon Calamari cruisers. And the banking clan comm ship that we see in Battlefront 2 did significantly change its look. Truncated version of this. Officially, you could say that they're like different versions, but really they're meant to be the same ship. If you want to read more on it yourself, check out the Essential Guide to Warfare, the complete cross-sections, and Starships of the Galaxy. Please hit that like button, it really is the best way to help me out. Comment your thoughts and suggestions, subscribe to see more, and check out these videos, I'm sure you'll like them. But most important of all, remember, don't let the Senate tell you what you can look up on the holonet, and the Force will be with you, always.